For real. Good morning, or good afternoon, or even good evening, depending on where you are in the world.
Good evening.
It is time. Hang on a second. Who am I? Ah, there we go. There we go. All right. Now let's begin. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone out there, depending on where you are. This is yet another webinar about the WEBCON way. Specifically, this one is going to be all about Microsoft 365 integration. We talk a lot about how WEBCON BPS works. I mean, look, it's wonderful, but it's kind of handy to show not so much how WEBCON BPS is great all by itself, but how it makes Microsoft 365 better. That's the focus of today's webinar. So let's get right to it. WEBCON BPS sits outside of SharePoint. We are a standalone environment. We work with our own engine and so on. That's actually a good thing. In fact, everyone else works this way. If you look at Logic Apps, if you look at Power Automate, if you look at most other third-party vendors, you know, there might be a couple of third-party vendors that attach to either the classic Windows Workflow Foundation framework or work with Workflow Manager. And of course, if you're still using, for some situations, SharePoint Designer, yes, okay. Those people are not sitting standalone. The rest of us, we do. And again, if you look at modern things, even from Microsoft, we're in very, very good company. But just because we aren't running inside of SharePoint doesn't mean that we don't pursue an aggressive strategy of integration. We aren't extending, we're integrating. But as it turns out, that works out really, really well. So what I'd like to do now is demonstrate WEBCON BPS applications living inside of SharePoint sites. So this is a WEBCON BPS application that's all about risk management. And look, there's plenty to like about that, but that's not my goal here. I don't want to show it to you inside of WEBCON. If you live in SharePoint, you should be seeing it inside of SharePoint. So here's my risk management application. I've got task counters. I've been very diligent. I don't have any tasks waiting for me. I can start and create a new risk, I suppose, but actually I'd like to take a look at the one that we've got here. So let's see. This one is this risk is about cooties, and I've got it configured to pop up in another window. You know, I actually don't want to leave SharePoint. So what I'm going to do here is make a slight adjustment to this web part. Yes, we integrate inside of SharePoint, doing it the way we're supposed to with web parts. So let me open this up. Let me configure the web part just a little bit and to say, when you open items, don't leave, don't change, just do what you do. All right, that's fine. Let's republish the page and continue. No, I don't want to tell people what it was like. It's fine. All right, let's go back and look at this. There we go. I'm not leaving SharePoint, and I'm working with a WEBCON BPS form. And this is all about a variety of risks. The details of the application those ought to take a back seat to the fact that I'm running the entire application with graphical analyses, with the ability to look at all pending tasks, all from one location. Here I've decided to pop up tasks inside of an external window, but again, I have none. So external windows work great. Doesn't have to work that way. Here is a solution for looking at potential new clients. If you're going to say that a lot of these things look very similar, well, a lot of business applications look very similar. Depends on whether or not they're based intensively on dashboards or based intensively on data management or action management. So these are forms for taking a look at different client intake things, or deciding whether or not we should take on a client, whether we have conflicts of interest and so on. There are a lot of options here. But the main thing is, if you wanted to see WEBCON working seamlessly inside of SharePoint, it does. In fact, this is all modern stuff. We are quite comfortably to work inside of classic sites as well. So here are this is a list of pending tasks. Whoops. That's an error on my part. Actually, okay, let's take a look here. Here are my WEBCON BPS tasks, and I'm living entirely inside of a SharePoint Classic environment. All right, so modern, classic. If you want to live in SharePoint, all of the assets of a WEBCON application will surface inside of your environment that way. But it's 2020, and a lot of us work inside of Microsoft Teams, and that's all right. We have you covered there as well. So let's jump over here and take a look at this particular Teams environment. And one moment, please. I just need to move something out of the way. Okay. So I am inside my entire risk management is the solution we were talking about before. Well, how about I start by just showing the entire dashboard for the risk management solution as a tab inside of my Teams. But if I just want to keep focused on only risk management tasks, or examine all of the pending cases, or if I want to strictly look at analyses of all of that, all of this is present and running happily inside of Teams. It doesn't even have to be one application at a time. Let me go to this entire company team. I have the ability to take a look at all of my pending tasks across all of my applications. I even have the ability to take a look at items that that have been deemed relevant to me. For example, I'm named inside of the running workflow scenario, or I started it, or it's an anomaly of some sort and I've been flagged as the person that looks after those things. There's certain applications that everyone takes part in, like training or asking for leave. All of those would be company-wide applications. We can have them run inside of the company-wide team. So look, if you want to run inside of Teams, run inside of Teams. If you want to run inside of SharePoint, run inside of SharePoint. In fact, if you want to run inside of Outlook, run inside of Outlook. And we give you multiple ways to get that done. Let me come back over here. And because email takes a few moments to process, I have already run this. But just in the interest of fairness, I will, let's see. Let's go ahead and I will show you that I have a pretty straightforward elementary workflow here. It's strictly designed to run something through a series of successive approvals, and I've configured every approval step slightly differently. The reason being is that I want you to see different ways I can interact with you over email. So if we do nothing more than a single checkbox when creating a task that says send standard email, it looks like this. If there's a description about the task or the step that you're in, you will see it here. you'll see information about who the task was assigned to, who was copied on it, who was assigned to it, if substitutions are in effect. Basically, we give you all the data we possibly can in one email. This is busy, but it's actually quite handy. So if you could see all the fields about what the instance number is for the workflow, what step we're in, who created it. The details would be fields in the form. You're not seeing the form right now, but if you want to see the form, that's what this is. Go to element, go to the running workflow instance, and there it is. If for some reason you'd rather open up the entire application and see what's going on, not just with this element, but with everything, there it is. All right, so that's option one. We send you a data dump. The most important stuff shows up right at the beginning. You have a task. This is the nature of the task, and click on it. Now, that's fine. I might not want to click on an element and go somewhere else. I might want to stay in emails. So option number two is to embed buttons in the email. So if I wanted to approve this, I just click here, and this sends an email with all the information needed for this to be auto-processed. That's option number two. Option number three is to compose custom messages inside of the email. So I created this. Let me go back over here. Yeah, this one involves a custom email. The message content is built up out of form fields and some status information coming from other places. Now, I've still said go to the default template, and if it says all this other extra information you can add to the message should be visible, throw it in there. It is, in fact, the default. So I am seeing my custom message, but I'm seeing it alongside a bunch of other stuff. So for the final thing, here's a nice, pleasant, minimalist message. Custom instructions as to what to do, custom buttons as to what to click. And in fact, if I know that everybody that is working with me has the appropriate Outlook add-in installed, I don't even need the buttons because I can turn on this. Show context item form. And this will display the current items form in the compact way. This is not too different from the way it would show up on a mobile device. In fact, I'm going to pin this so it doesn't go away. So here's everything about my request and my ability to click approve and decline and all that good stuff. It just works. Not bad, eh? In fact, here, if I move to a different, let me see, I just need to go to a different, yeah, okay, let me click on this. Okay, no associated item here. It's not like we keep that stuff up forever. And in fact, if we move from task to task, you will see the appropriate form load. In fact, you can even have it appear and disappear depending on whether the email message in question contains any WEBCON information whatsoever. So if you install our add-in, you're going to have a pretty good time. How do you get the add-in? Well, your admin can give you a link to it, but if you go to a WEBCON BPS portal, one of the options here is to install Microsoft Office add-ins. So what you're looking at here is Outlook Lite. This works in Outlook Web Access. It works, actually it works on the Mac. It works everywhere. It's a general purpose modern Outlook add-in. There is a higher feature set classic add-in that does even more things, including capturing emails that are part of processes and automatically attaching them to the processes. It's also how you get the Teams add-in. This is something an admin might only need to do once, and then it's simply done. But it just works. All right, so risk management working inside of Standalone, working inside of SharePoint, working inside of Teams, working inside of Outlook, one of 5 different ways. Depends on whether you can depend on Outlook always being there and the add-in is always being there, or whether you want the body of the email to do more of the work. I personally like a 1-2 combination. I love having, if the add-in is there, I want it to do its job. Otherwise, I want to give the user the option to do everything possible. In fact, the one thing I would probably add here is add back the link to open the element. Now, some of you might want to know how all of this works. And I could go into our standard architecture slide. This is very accurate and very thorough, but it's also very busy. I would kind of like to distill it down to the following things. If you take apart WEBCON BPS into its largest 3 components, this is true whether you're installing it in your own data center or whether you're installing it inside of a cloud-hosted VM, or whether you analyze our software as a service offering, which is completely hosted. You just subscribe to it and it just works. No matter what, there are 3 key components to what's going on architecturally. We have a workflow engine that does the lion's share of the work. The workflow engine talks to SQL Server assets. Usually this is an actual copy of SQL Server, either running on premises or in the cloud. It can be SQL Azure. And if you, SQL Azure at this point does not support transactions that span databases. So unless you're running a very small deployment, I would probably suggest sticking with real SQL Server. And then finally, there's a web application server. This is something we added a couple of years ago. We didn't necessarily have this. We used SharePoint itself as our user interface engine. You would administer WEBCON BPS inside of SharePoint Central Admin. Everything was developed directly inside of SharePoint, but we use the web application server to provide a couple of key things. There's an aggregation portal. Here, let me flip over and show it to you in context. This is a view of every application you're authorized to see, and a unified view of all the tasks that are waiting for you. I did not have any risk management tasks, but I've certainly got plenty of other ones. And if I wanted to go through and look at a variety of different applications, this is a unified view of all of them. If you wanted one big business process portal, this would be a way to deliver it. You could stick the whole thing inside of a team or inside of SharePoint and so on, but if you wanted a roll-up view of everything you've got, this is a great way to do it. And of course, some people would prefer it to be a standalone website, so it's there. The trick is, though, we don't really, we built this for aggregation purposes, but that's not really the thing. If we open up risk management, for example, you're seeing a dashboard page. It's made up out of what we call widgets. Think of a widget as a web part. It pretty much can be. We didn't build this to send the whole page into SharePoint, for example. Let's see, that's potential new client. Let's go back to risk management. We built this so that this is one web part. This is exactly this. This list of risks over here in WEBCON land, this is referred to as a report. It's an interactive data view. It's not just a read-only view of something, but this is exactly this. But if we edit this, we should see this is a web part, that's a web part, that's a web part. We're sharing context information. We integrate completely with Azure AD, so we know who you are, and essentially we'll pull information from this server by remoting pieces of this user interface and redisplaying them inside of this user interface. And that's pretty much how it works. So we use it as a remote UI component server. It can be a standalone application server, but the other big thing is it serves as a report and dashboard studio. So if I wanted to create, for example, a new report or edit an existing report, I don't need to go into our design environment to do that. The other reason why we have this is so I can go straight to this report and start configuring it some more. Where do I want to pull the data from? Which columns do I want to display? Do I want to enable any mass actions or customize the search parameters? Do I want to create different views that look different ways? Some of them are in fact charts and so on. You close and you move on. It's a way of delegating some ability to do things for yourself without giving you the keys to the kingdom and letting you develop anything you want. So that was the purpose of creating this website. We did this so that we can give you this without needing this, which is full trust code. All right. Basically, we're doing it exactly the way Microsoft wants applications to exist in the modern world, which is you remotely surface them inside of your environment. In fact, you know, we are an exceptionally good company on that front. Look at all these other different applications that work fundamentally the same way. We've got slightly different components for teams, whether you have your own WEBCON installation. This could be running in Azure virtual machines, Amazon Web Services, different virtual machines. This could be working on premises. That's what this one is for. This one is specifically talking to our software as a service offering. The difference between them, they're almost identical. This doesn't need to ask you for a URL when you configure it the first time. It's about the only, because we know where our service lives. That's about the only difference between those two. All right, the workflow engine actually interacts with SharePoint and the rest of Microsoft 365 in a big way. It is the workflow engine. It's based on state machine technology. If you're a workflow geek, you know what that means, and I suspect you'll like it. That's a topic for a different webinar. In fact, there is a video for this on our YouTube channel. It's the workflow engine's job to integrate with APIs and data coming from other places. And sure enough, Microsoft 365 furnishes us with a lot of web parts. We also have services that are handled by the workflow engine for handling things like document generation or document scanning, OCR and parsing information to look at form fields and so on. We regularly fetch foreign exchange rates and provide some means to use that within solutions. It's a long, long list of things. And then finally, SQL Server is responsible for storing data and for managing transactions. That's right. If we have a lot of activity taking place during a workflow step and any of it fails, we roll it all back to the previous state. That's nice. Doesn't really talk about our Microsoft 365 integration, so I don't want to dwell on that. But yeah, that's the job of these three different pieces to WEBCON BPS's architecture. That's how we work. The thing that we wind up delivering to SharePoint and Teams and Outlook and the rest of Microsoft 365 is a new kind of list type or library type or content storage vehicle. We call them case folders. And let me show you what I mean by this. This is a big add-in or a big contribution to a Microsoft 365 environment. A case folder, if you want to start with a document set and make it more powerful, that's probably a good way to think of it. So we certainly can be a container for multiple documents with metadata, but we can also have multiple sublists or detail items in it. We can, well, more on that in a second. It's lighter weight than a site, But if you didn't have case folders, you would need an entire SharePoint site to do these kinds of things, because we have multiple, one or more sets of line items, 0 or more, I guess. You don't need to have detail items, but you can. There's always a place for comments. There's always a place for multiple attachments. We can even combine system information, like how long we've been waiting, what step we're in, what the ID number is, who created this, I already said how long we've been waiting, which users were involved in a previous step, things along those lines. That's system data. Process data would be, for example, our current state. User data would be fields in the form. Those can all appear together. Oh, process data would also involve the audit trail. It behaves like a document when you need it to. So the whole thing can be thought of as a document, treated like a document, queried like a document. Or you can pretend, because we provide APIs that make it behave this way, like it's a set of discrete tables, one for all the attachments, one for all the line items, one for the top level items, and so on. And you can aggregate across them if you need to. One set of permissions. I can secure the whole thing with one access control list. That will affect all attachments, all comments, everything. I don't have to chase different content sources and secure them all in different steps. And then, yeah, one audit trail, one version history. In fact, let me show you case folders in action. And I will, actually, yeah, let's do this. This is a purchasing dashboard. And these are purchase requests involving me. And for me to talk about what I mean by a case file, no, not that one. Let's use this one. I just wanted something with attachments. So this contains basic information about me. In fact, some of this is fetched data coming from Azure AD. This would be details about my request, top level master information. These would be detail rows, information pulled from an external data source or an external application about our preferred vendor. Here's a trail of comments. Here are attached files. I don't have any attached emails. No, not yet. And I've even got reports that are showing me data pulled from other locations. This could be a tabular report, it could be a graphical report, it could be a window into it could function pretty much like a web part. The difference about this is if you use our built-in system, we have the ability of caching what the query looked like at this time. So just being able to pull everything together in one place and secure it with one set of permissions is nice. Knowing that the whole thing has a common status and a common set of metadata is nice. Knowing where it is graphically is nice. And this, knowing the audit trail as it moved from here to here to here to here and seeing what was added and what was changed, that's really nice. And in fact, being able to look at what the form looked like in step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and so on, and so on, and so on, is really nice as well. So I love the fact that when I look at a set of all my available purchase requests, I get something that looks and feels like a list or a library, but each one of these things is actually a lot richer than that. So how about we go ahead and I embed this directly inside of Teams. Let me show you what this looks like. So I am going to, actually, let's just create a new team for this. And yeah, it's private, and I'm going to call this purchasing. Thanks. Yep. This is all good. No, we're going to skip this. I'll add members later. All right. Let's get this in here. So I'm going to add this. Yep. I'm adding WEBCON to this. Let's log in. All right. Choose the mode. Here's what I would like to take a look at. Let's start with just a report of purchase requests. So pick the application. We're going to go to the one called purchasing, choose which report, a view of data that we want to take a look at. I want purchase requests. Which view do we want on it? You'll see why that's handy in a few moments. I will let somebody change the views as they see fit. And in terms of opening links, we'll throw it in that way. Don't want to apply a theme to it. Let's have some fun. Let's do a blue theme. We'll choose and save the thing. And we posted an announcement about the tab. All right, so there it is. And now I can start interacting with all of my requests. It just shows up much like a SharePoint list would inside of Teams. Use it to your heart's content. Now, we did talk about changing views, did we not? Well, let's talk about that even a little more. This view says all purchase requests. How about looking at purchases per department or purchases per vendor and so on? I'm going to go back here, but we also have things like requests where I participated or only the ones that are currently under board review. There are none. Okay, that's nice. Let's say I want to do that again. So I would like the graph to appear all by itself. So again, I'm already logged in. That's a form. If I wasn't already logged in, I would need to provide some login credentials, but I don't need to do that. I've done it before. So let's throw this in. We're going to do another report. Same application. In fact, it's going to be the same report, just a different view. And this one is going to be purchases per department. And let's see, opening, if you want to open an element, it'll be in the same window. And we'll just stick with default. Okay, save it. Here it is. We should obviously rename these things. And I think I forgot something when configuring it. So let's go back here and fix this. I will go back to report and I will choose purchasing, purchase requests. Let's see, purchases by category and stick with, link opening mode in the chosen elements window. Save. I'll figure that out later. Here's purchases per department. And I labeled them accordingly. Similarly, another fun thing that's worth putting in here might be, instead of having this be a report or a chart or something like that, I might want, again, I don't want somebody to just look at one page with the kitchen sink in it. How about we take a look at tasks? So application tasks specific to this. So purchasing related tasks. Chosen elements window, choose and save. And here's a list of all my pending tasks. That's all it takes to embed all the elements within. Oh, and yes, if you want to show the entire thing here, tell you what, let's do this. Let me go ahead and turn this into displaying the entire dashboard. So application view, the application will be purchasing, and we'll collapse the navigation menu, and that's it. So if for some reason, oh really, we're going to refresh that. And I will figure out what that problem is later. Oops. Ah, there we go. Okay, it finally did kick in just as it was being deleted. Must have been an HTTP error of some sort. It's all right. You get the idea. I can put all of the elements for a particular report directly inside of my team, and this becomes a more interactive workspace, not just for conversations and content storage, but access to applications. And it's pretty easy. I'd like to talk now about actions and connections, because yes, we've talked plenty about making WEBCON applications surface and act like a part of Microsoft 365. But Microsoft 365 has a lot of its own assets, and those should be available inside of WEBCON applications. And it turns out that's actually really easy. We have SharePoint content. We have SharePoint privilege access. We have the ability to generate Office documents. We can manipulate Exchange calendars, and well, frankly, everything in the Microsoft Graph API works. I'll tell you what, actually, this is one of those things that's, again, best to show rather than talk about. So how about we do this? Let's do the easy one first, which is working directly with SharePoint content. So what you're looking at here is a workflow where I send in a request to get an event approved. It gets reviewed. If it's approved, we take it to finished. If it's declined, we could just go straight to withdrawn, but I send it back to the author to allow them to make changes and resubmit if they choose to. The author can always give up, in which case it becomes withdrawn. It's an easy execution pattern for us. All right, so what this does in a couple of, this is using SharePoint stuff in two places. Yes, while the workflow is running, it's living inside of WEBCON BPS. But until that point, it's using SharePoint. So when you open up this form, there's a field here called event category. An event category is a choice field. And a choice field gets its data source from this SharePoint event place called event categories. As to where that comes from, there's an entire part to our Designer Studio where you set up connections to external data sources, and then you create reusable data sources that call them. Now we can grab data from SOAP, we can grab data from RESTful web services. That's how we talk to the Graph API. We can get information from Active Directory and Azure Active Directory and other user lists coming from multiple places, certainly Oracle and SQL databases, even fixed values lists, or other workflows. But the one I care about right now is a SharePoint list. So this is making use of this connection that I've created. It's a SharePoint site collection connection. I can have different connection settings for dev and test and production, but I'm using a common set for all of them at this point. But yes, if I want to develop against one SharePoint site and then in production use a different SharePoint site, that's really easy for us to set up proactively. Put in all the connection details, test that connection. Okay, this is a reusable connection. I don't need to configure this every single time. And then when I want to create a data source that I can use over and over again, give it a name, indicate which data source it's coming from, data source type, and which specific data source, and then provide the which site you want to connect to and which list you'd like to work with. And I've already done that. And yes, anytime I'm working with access to data from other places, I can test it before I use it. All right, so there, I just pointed to that data source and I use it over and over and over again. By the way, if I want to make sure it's still working, click test. I can filter it here or I can filter it at query time and we'll just dynamically adapt accordingly. All right, so there's that. The second part to this where we're interacting with SharePoint is as we move from review to finished, we're following this particular path, and that has this action taking place along this path called publish to SharePoint. And this is an action we have that, so go to this connection, this list. Yes, I'm just choosing from a set of available lists. And then here we go. Here are the fields in the form. Here are the form fields, although again, I've got context variables and system fields and lots of things I can choose from in terms of the values I want to stuff in there. And I can save the ID I get back in another place. I can do all kinds of clever things here. But basically, this is what I do to post a list element. In order to use the whole thing, it looks kind of like this. So if I want to create a new event, I will make it an event of, it's an expo, and we'll call it Expo Rama. And we'll have it, given what's going on these days, we'll have it take place far in the future, and we'll submit it. So I already fetched SharePoint data. And then if I come over here to approved events and refresh it. Oh, I haven't approved it yet. Okay, hang on a moment. Let me go ahead and approve it. Oh, the person who has to approve it is Alice. That's all right. I happen to have Alice right here and all of her tasks across many different applications. This would be one for reviewing a demo. This would be one for a leave request. This one, however, is my review. Let's approve it. Okay, it worked. So now, if I come back over here and I refresh this, oh, I didn't even have to refresh it. It did it in the background. There, Expo Rama. That's a really simple example, but it's us working aggressively with SharePoint content. That's lists, that's document libraries, that's just about everything. In fact, let's go back to Designer Studio. If I want to work with SharePoint content, I can touch all of these things. So that includes creating sites and lists and such. That involves downloading attachments. I've got lots and lots of options. And if I want to manipulate SharePoint groups, then their members or manipulate privileges on items, I have access to all of that through ready-to-use drag and drop components. But we're not just talking about SharePoint. We also can deal with Office documents. Office documents are a big part of Microsoft 365. Let's show that to you in action. I have that purchase request solution, right? And in that purchase request solution, well, I could have a document automatically generated near the end, like say if the board approves it or it's not high value and so on. By the time we approve it, we don't want somebody to just open up an interactive form. I might want to send something somewhere. And yes, I could attach the URL to the form, that would work. But I might really want a document. And in this particular case, I've added what's called a global action, which is a menu button that I'm calling create document, and it's invoking generate a Word file. And why did I do that? I want it to be something that can be done at any time. Here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's go back here to a purchase request. Let's take that one. And this is a supporting asset. It's not the primary asset. What I would like to do here is create a document consisting of the things I care about from this form. Now I'm only going to have to click this once, and it's going to happen really quickly. And now I have a Word document. And in fact, I can preview it. Purchase request, there's my name, my department, the date of the request, and all of my relevant line items. Obviously, I could make it a lot more interesting than that. I can even add an action to it to convert it to a PDF file, and then we can preview that. Well, and download it and email it and do anything we want with it. Now, what does that look like? It's actually pretty easy. All I needed to do is say the mode I want to work in is create a new file. I could even update an existing one or create a new file for item list rows. There are a lot of different permutations. The thing to focus on, however, is I'm choosing a document that could be located in a URL in a SharePoint document library, or an attachment to the current item, could be the template itself, or I can have a library of document templates and draw from that. And this is, in this particular case, I'm going to a documents templates process, and that's the GUID for it. As to how I got that, it's easier than you might think. But all I had to do was that. And then for the output, I use the title of the document as its value. I can insert into this a lot of extra metadata and categories and file descriptions and so on, but I'm not going to do that here. How did I get that template? I'll show you. A document template, let's see, right there. It's just another kind of list or report or data view, or call it what you will, but there it is. And if I open it, actually, I'll download a copy and open it from there. There we go. All right, so it's basically a Word document with tokens inside of it. No big deal. Where did the tokens come from? Right here. In WEBCON BPS, I have access to file generation templates, so all I need to do is choose the process that I really want to take a look at. And let's see, this one would be in finance and it would be purchasing. Choose which process and which document type, and then go ahead and grab all the form fields or all the context information you care about. We've even got things like barcodes and so on that can all be embedded in this. But all I did was either double click or drag and drop, and that inserted these tokens in. It works really well. It's not very different to do the whole thing in Excel for that matter. It just works. In fact, when we bring up Excel, it's probably worth pointing out something. When we talk about our ability to interact with Office documents, it's probably not a bad idea to introduce that, yeah, we can generate PDF files directly or generate Word files directly or convert them to PDFs, and certainly generate Excel files using much the same technique you just saw. But we also have the ability to read data directly out of Excel files. We can do that in a tabular fashion, or just pluck one list at a time, read them directly into form fields, and do creative things with them. Exchange calendars and out of the office information. That's an excellent one. Let's take a look at that ever so quickly. I believe we have a solution around here for managing leave. The main thing about this that's important is here near the end, after the HR department reviews it, and if they approve it, a lot of things can take place here. So let's Let's open up behind the scenes what's going on in that path as we move from the HR approval stage to the completed stage. Along the approval path, if someone chooses this, we're going to do 6 different things before it is finished. And one of those things is setting up their Exchange auto reply. Well, this is a built-in action we've got for interacting with Exchange. We can manipulate Exchange events, Exchange tasks. Some people still use those. I understand Microsoft To Do is a happy thing, and obviously we have WEBCON BPS workflow tasks. But this is the one that we're working with, and it's the out-of-office auto reply. What did I do? Didn't have to choose very much. All I needed to say is who's going to be affected by this and what are the settings in question. The start date, the end date, this is the auto reply message. I can, basically we have access to the whole thing. So that's it. We have access not just to sending and receiving email, but we have access to Exchange's infrastructure. Again, you need to configure it, but you only configure it once, and after that, you just use it. Last one, the Microsoft Graph API. This one is great because it essentially says there's nothing we can't accomplish with WEBCON BPS. And the way we work with RESTful web services, well, again, this is the kind of thing where a demo says 1,000 words. In this particular environment, I've got a connection configured with the REST details. So let's see, it's a REST web service. Here's my authorization URL and app ID and app secret. I configure this once and make it a data source. And then after that, I've got access to it here. Like for example, this is going to show me all the teams that a given user, and we'll calculate that on the fly, has joined. If you want to test that, here are the results. Okay, this is a data source that I can start using to my heart's content. And this can involve filtering criteria if you wish to. That can be done using by passing parameters to the web service or just filtering it once it's been fetched. You decide whether it should happen on the back end or the front end. And if I just use this, it'll appear to be a table. I can use it in choice fields or item lists or data tables and such. The other way that you can get some mileage out of this, this is an application for actually provisioning teams. So someone registers a request, it goes through a review, and if we've confirmed that it's okay to create it, we invoke 2 actions, one to create a group, one to create a team. And no, I don't expect somebody to configure those on the fly. I have created and made them available to, well, throughout every process in this application, but I could promote them to being global if I wished to. Here is an action called create group. It is a REST web service, and it's based, I'm using that connection. Yes, I could use a custom connection if I wish to. I don't, I want to reuse. It's a very simple web service request. There's not a lot of detail to it, but yes, if you needed different verbs or methods, if you needed different headers, it's all there. Throw in the JSON, and then when the response comes back, you map the details coming back to form fields. So I have one request whose job it is to do that, and then a second request whose job it is to create the team from the group. I'm taking the ID that I got from creating the group and I use it to create the team. All right, and obviously the Graph API can be used for many, many, many things. Graph API, for those of you not familiar with it, is a set of RESTful endpoints that will allow one to touch virtually, well, almost everything. It gets more and more elaborate on a month-to-month basis, or certainly a quarter-to-quarter basis. You can query and interact with lots of different assets. In fact, if you're using Classic Exchange and Classic SharePoint RESTful APIs, you might want to switch over to Graph. We're certainly doing more with Graph on a very regular basis. So until we provide more methods inside of our drag and drop catalog of ready-to-use actions, you can get any action you want by configuring a Graph API once, and then you can reuse that action over and over again. Oh, and sorry, I had a slide for going through all of this, but I just flipped back and forth there. All right, well, close to the top of the hour, so let's sum up. When you put together modern web parts and you add to that support for classic web parts, because some of us are still using classic websites, and you look at our ability to add ourselves into Teams and add ourselves into Outlook, either with generic email tasks that work for any client or Outlook specific add-in stuff, and the ability to generate and read Office documents, and the ability to interact with SharePoint data and SharePoint actions, and do just about anything you need in the Microsoft Graph API, and the fact that we interact seamlessly with Azure AD so that there's no extra logging in, so we behave like a part of your interactive Microsoft 365 session. Well, you put all that together, and that's a wonderful way to workflow. The WEBCON way. And with that, I'd like to thank you very, very much for attending. And if you'd like more information on any and all of this, go to www.webcon.com. All roads lead to there. And now, if you have questions, you can either ask them verbally. I'd actually prefer you type them into a chat window, and I will read them aloud and then share them with the group. Question number one is, will there be a recording for this webinar? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely, there will be a recording for this. It should be available in a few days. Typically what happens is I like to grab the recording, edit out anytime I use or something like that. And in this particular time, I think I had a bug pop up. I'm going to edit that out. So give this a couple of days. By the beginning of next week, it should be available. It'll be on our YouTube channel. Any other questions?
Yes, regarding the integration possibilities, especially ERP integration.
Oh, sure.
Do you have any preferable integration buses that you or your clients are using regarding integration with SEAP or other ERPs?
I'll give you an answer that a lot of workflow companies will give you, and none of us are lying, we're all sincere in this. It's really a determination as to what you want to have happen. So in my case, for example, in WEBCON BPS's case, we have customers that have done everything, and you mentioned SAP, so let's stick with SAP for a second. We have people that have created custom BAPIs or RFCs and added that to their ZLive. And for everybody that doesn't use SAP, it's basically they wrote custom SAP functions and loaded that into a catalog. Those are SOAP web services or REST web services, and we just call them much the same way I was calling the Graph API before. That's a possibility. The other option is to use iDocs. Yes, we can format an iDoc request, drop it off, and then pick up the results and scan them or analyze them and then continue with that. That's an option. Another option is to use, you said service buses. Yes, we have people that have worked with Theobald in the past and worked with Citrion, I think. I may be mistaken about that, but I'll double check. In essence, service buses also expose what they do as web services, and it would be, I have yet to find a web service I can't call with about 5 minutes of research. And once that's done, we basically turn that into a set of reusable data sources, a set of reusable actions, a set of reusable business rules, and you never need to see those details when you're actually building the business process.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Let's see. Does this integration with Teams work with WEBCON BPS Express? Yes, it does. Absolutely does. What the BPS Express is really only, let's see, the big three things, there are a few subtle differences, but the big three differences between BPS Express and full-blown paid WEBCON BPS, one, you're limited to 10 gigabytes of storage. It's kind of like SQL Server Express Edition. That's also limited to 10 gigs of storage. So yes, we limit the total amount of storage you can use. Second thing is there is no support for going through dev, test, production deployments. It just assumes that you're always in production. If you want stage deployments, that's something you pay for. It's not obscenely expensive by any stretch of the imagination. We're a very competitively priced product. But yes, the Express Edition just assumes you're going to install it, use it, and keep going. And then the third big difference is the OCR technology we use. We OEM that from Abby. Abby's a great product. They're used by many, 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 many people, but obviously we pay them for that. So and since there's no cost, there's no, we're not going to include that. By the way, it's only the OCR. Everything else inside of WEBCON comes from us. So taking the OCR data and then analyzing that with AI to figure out what form fields are embedded inside of that OCR text and so on, that's all us. It's just literally the OCR component. That's not in the Express Edition. But those are the big three things. So yeah, the Teams integration, mobile access, all that totally works with Express. Question number 3. You have an integration with SAP, and that involves a dedicated web service. So can you pass cost invoices from BPS to SAP? Yes. Not only can we do it, it is being done in several places. It's not a problem whatsoever. Any other questions? In fact, if you've got a question, but it's going to take you a moment to type it, just type into the chat window, question coming up. So I know to wait. And then I'll make up a question and answer it while I wait for you. All right. Well, then we've reached the top of the hour, and I want to thank you very much for participating. Again, go to www.webcon.com for more information. Have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, and stay tuned, or more to the point, keep an eye on your inbox. We do these webinars every couple of weeks, and we do have one coming up very, very shortly. Details in the next email notice. Have a good one. Bye, everybody.